Let me just give you a brief background of how fisheries is being managed and developed in the Pacific region. I'm with one of the organizations that's called the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, and we are the premium political and economic organization in the Pacific. And it was the wisdom of our leaders that they set up another regional organization that's called Forum Fisheries Agency, that was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, which looked at managing our fisheries resources, particularly the tuna fisheries, the migratory fisheries. My organization and the FFA, we work very closely because fisheries is one of the 5 key priorities for our leaders. We have 18 member countries that includes Australia and New Zealand, and the other small Pacific Island countries. And our leaders have identified fisheries as one of their key priorities, and it is a standing agenda item for their meeting that takes place every year. So these regional organizations, they're working much more closely to try and support the management and the development of our fisheries resources. We also have another regional agency called the Pacific Community, or SPC, and they are our science provider, and they also manage our coastal fisheries. So we have these 2 different regional organizations that support coastal fisheries management and development, as well as offshore fisheries. And then we provide some of the political support to these 2 organizations. And we're all working closely. We call the organizations of crop agencies, or organizations. In 2022, our forum leaders endorsed what we call our North Star, and that is a 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which outlines what our aspirations are for the Pacific. And it has 7 thematic areas. One of those thematic areas on ocean and environment, and that focuses on the protection of the ocean and the environment. And there's another thematic area that focuses on resources and economic development. And I have to say that I'm very happy to be in a discussion that doesn't see development or have a negative stigma to development, because it's always seen as such. Whenever we start talking about development, everyone's like, bringing up their bows and arrows and coming at us. So it's very refreshing to be in a conversation that talks about the sustainable development. In the Pacific region, we currently have the most healthiest tuna stock, and it's something that we are proud of as managers of these resources. And we have what is called the green tower. So when we compare the stocks for tuna in the Pacific region and the Pacific Ocean, comparing that to the other oceans, we are actually towering. So we would like to call that the green tower. And so for our fisheries managers, we pat them in the back and say, good job. But if we look at the benefits that we're getting or that we're harnessing out of that, how much of that benefit really comes back to us? Do we have a green tower on the benefits? And the answer to that is no, because although we are managing this tuna resource, we have been managing it successfully, and we are providing more than 50% of the global tuna supply. We get about only 10% of that multi-billion-dollar industry in terms of that. We share similar challenges in the Pacific to what you are facing here in the Caribbean. IUU fishing, overexploitation, limited capacity. But I think we've spent a lot of time talking about these challenges. Maybe it's enough talking and move into doing, bringing some tangible benefits and actionable, some actions so that we can derive more benefits out of it. I'm very happy to hear the discussions this morning and going back in history, providing that historical background with the EEZ. looking at it from an economic perspective, it's an opportunity because it was more of like a distribution of wealth where we're given that right and privilege to utilize that, not only manage that resource, but see how we can benefit from it. So the question that we ask is, have we really harnessed the full potential of that opportunity that has been given to us? And so from what we've heard, it's not. The answer to that is not. So with this long-term strategy that our leaders involve, we are now working to develop what is called the Pacific Roadmap for Economic Development. And in the heart of that is fisheries. Part of the work that we're working with the FFA on is there was an initiative that our fisheries ministers endorsed last year, and it's called the East New Britain Initiative. It's a funny name, but funny names always catch the attention of people because East New Britain is actually where the place that it's an island in Papua New Guinea where this ministerial meeting took place. So instead of calling it a fisheries initiative, it's called the East New Britain Initiative. And there are two concepts or two initiatives in that. One is to develop the hub and spoke approach. We use the hubs and spoke approach to develop fisheries and setting up of a regional fisheries development fund. Now, just give some background on those two initiatives. So the hub and spoke, as small island development states, we are scattered, and we can't do anything about our geographical location. But that doesn't mean that we can't find our way to work around some of the challenges that isolation has. But we do have some competitive or comparative advantages. For example, one of our island countries is Kiribati, and it has the largest EEZ. But the land base is very small, just like most of the islands here in the Caribbean. But it has the most productive fishing grounds for tuna. So if you look at their effort to try and add value to the tuna, processing on land, it's very challenging because access to water, affordable power, or even accessible to power is very challenging. But those things are necessary for onshore processing. We have a neighboring country, Papua New Guinea. It's a much bigger island. There's a supply of laborers there that the labor market is quite cheaper. Access to water, electricity is cheaper there. So it can provide that opportunity for processing. So the idea of the hubs and spokes is how we can use these bigger countries where cost of production may be lower to use those as hubs for the smaller countries that have the resources. They do have the fish, so they can be spokes and supply these bigger countries. And we'll try and process our own fish before we send them out to markets. A lot of our fish are being processed in Bangkok. And two of our fisheries ministers went to Bangkok, and in that event, the introductory remark was, "Welcome to the tuna capital." Bangkok doesn't. So to these ministers, they thought to themselves, that's what we should be saying. We are the tuna capital of this land. So we have to do something about it. So if you look at it, it's changing the mindset that, we want to bring those economic activities to our region because, as resource owners, we can do more with this resource that, like what was alluded to earlier, this is the most important resource that we have. So that's the idea of the hub and spoke approach, and we're trying to bring that to upscale some of the initiatives that individual countries are undertaking. And some of our members, or most of our members, what they have realized is that they have tried to develop their own fisheries, but they can only go so far. To go further, we have to work together, like what was alluded to, the importance of collaboration, bringing innovation and collaboration into the mix. The second initiative is to develop a regional fisheries development fund. As you're all aware, accessing the right amount of capital, or the capital that may be required for us to build and develop our fisheries is very, very difficult. And so for us in the Pacific, we thought instead of putting a hand out and keep begging our development partners, why don't we build our own fund ourselves? And one resource that can do that is fisheries. So now with fisheries, particularly the tuna being in our EEZ, and what we've been told by scientists is that these, with the warming impact of climate change, the tuna will move out of our EEZ. By 2050, we'll be losing about 10% of our current revenues. So while we have the tuna in our waters, we want to see what we can get out of that and build this fund so that it can support our sustainable development going forward. One of the presenters mentioned the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. It's good where you can sort of address the highly subsidized distant water fishing nations. But I ask the question, are we as SIDS ready to fill the gap if these distant water fishing nations are facing out their fishing boat or not really, when some of these fishing boats are not economically viable to come to our waters to fish there? And a lot of questions and a lot of answers from our Pacific is that no, we're not ready. Don't have the capacity to go out and catch those fishes ourselves. And largely not because we can't catch the fish, but we cannot afford to buy the boats to go out and catch the fish. And with all some of the international regulations that sort of prohibit the amount of emission, the kind of the things that come with the old boats that we can afford, that limits our capability. So to strengthen our fishes, want to give them opportunities or try and make accessing to finance easier. So that's the idea behind trying to develop this fisheries development fund. So in our fisheries, we work closely to support the development. And one of the things that we are trying to improve in cooperation and collaboration, not just amongst fishers, because when we look at fisheries development, you have to work with other related sectors, like finance, like trade, infrastructure. Those things, you will need them to develop fisheries. So what we're trying now to do is see how we can bring cohesion to our policies. Some of our finance people are the ones who put in place policies that some of them at the moment are not very good for investors. How can we create environment that is investor friendly? So that's why it's important that we talk to these other sectors. How can we put in place trade agreements that's conducive to us so that we can try and get our products to the market at a lower tariff or perhaps no tariff at all? So policy cohesion is very important when it comes to fisheries development, so that we're not just focusing on our fisheries. We need to see how best we can work with other sectors in order to support our fisheries development. To wrap up, I can't emphasize enough the importance of collaboration. Maybe not just in our part of the world. From what I'm hearing, it'll be important to work in collaboration with yourselves. There's more we can learn from you, and perhaps there's something you can learn from us too. The striking a right balance between conservation and development is also very important. Just because we talk about development doesn't mean we want to do away with the conservation efforts. No. We know the benefits of that, but how do we strike the right balance is something that's critical for us, because of course we'll need the fish to still be in the water for us to develop it. And I also like the idea of the comment that was made about think locally before you think globally. As SIDS, we can't keep playing the victim card. Oh, we are small. We're the least to contribute to the cause of this global warming. We've been doing that for quite some time, but perhaps that time has come to an end. We need to pull our socks up and put a skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think collaboration among SIDS is much more important now than ever. And I leave you with those few words. And I'm sorry I couldn't stay for the rest of the session, but I'll leave my card here at the front, and happy to stay in touch with you for any, if anything you want to learn more about the Pacific, happy to do that. And thank you very much.
We appreciate you sharing that perspective from the Pacific and the rich lessons and experiences. Okay. Certainly, we do have a lot in common.